Hi YouTube, so today I'd like to talk to you about square roots, which are surds, and sometimes this can be super scary, but it doesn't have to be scary. Square root is just a way of finding the number which, if you squared it, would be the number you have now. So for example, 7 squared is 7 times 7, which is 49. And so the square root of 49 is 7. Now a lot of the time students make mistakes with square roots, thinking that square root means halving. It doesn't mean halving. The square root of 49 is not half of 49. You have to backtrack in your mind and see if you can find a number which, in fact, if you were to square it, would give you 49. Now luckily 49 is a perfect square, so the square root of 49 is 7. Now one good skill to have before you do work with square roots is to, of course, know your square numbers. If you know 1 squared, 2 squared, 3 squared, 4 squared, if you know all your perfect squares up to 10, even 15, even maybe 20, then that's going to help you a lot. Now the second skill, of course, is how do we manipulate square roots so that we know how to deal with them, so that we're not too scared or intimidated when we have to deal with them. And this is what I hope I can do for you today. So, first of all, let's talk about a little concept here, square root island. So this is something I like to explain to my students. Imagine that you have a place called square root island and only perfect squares can leave. So in other words, if you're nerdy enough, you can take a boat and you can leave square root island and you get square rooted. So the boat would be the square root boat. So 6 is not a perfect square, 5 is not a perfect square, 3 is not a perfect square, but 25 is a perfect square. So 25 is allowed to leave square root island and in the process becomes square rooted, and the square root of 25 is 5. So when you see a question like square root of 75, you can say, oh, this is the square root of 25 times 3, because you recognize that 75 is 25 times 3. And because you know your squares and you know that 25 is a perfect square, so you change your 75 into 25 times 3, and sure enough, the 25 can leave the square root, and in the process becomes square rooted and becomes a 5. So the square root of 75 is the same thing as 5 root 3. The 3 can't leave. He's stuck on square root island. Bad day at the office. Sucks for him, right? So this is how you can simplify square roots. And this is the skill you need to acquire. So you need to recognize perfect squares. Now I've put a few examples here on the board for you so that we can talk a little bit about how we manipulate square roots. So the first thing is the reverse operation. If you were to square a number and square root it, these two actually cancel each other out. So when you get the square root of 7 squared, that's actually 7. You can think about it logically. If you're to do 7 squared, which is 49, and you square root it again, you get 7. So square root and squared cancel each other out. They're inverse operators of each other, so or inverse functions of each other, if you like. Now here's another example, which is a little bit similar to root 75 over there. Square root of 8. And if you look inside the number 8, you can see that 8 is 4 times 2. So you can say square root of 8 is square root of 4 times square root of 2. And square root of 4 can leave the square root because it is a perfect square and it becomes a 2. The square root of 4 is 2. So the square root of 8 is the same as 2 root 2. This root 2 is stuck inside the square root. He cannot leave. Can't take the boat. Now, I'd like you to know that you can treat square roots just like any other number or any other variable, and you can actually add them together. So if you get 2 root 2 and 5 root 2, that's actually 7 root 2. It's like if I said, what's 2 apples plus 5 apples? Well, that's just 7 apples. So that's one thing to bear in mind. And so another case which you might encounter is when you have a square root and a whole number multiplied by each other in a bracket and squared. So if you have 2 root 2 and you need to square this, you should square the 2 and you should square the root 2 as well. So if you separate these two a little bit, now this means that they're multiplied by each other and then squared. So 2 squared is 4, and then root 2 squared is 2. So 4 times 2 is 8. And that's how you can work with this one. Okay, so this is a little quick one to help you with square roots. And so if this was useful to you, make sure to like and follow us on Instagram at MathemagicMD, and on Facebook, facebook.com/HLMathemagic. And Just for you today, here's a really, really nerdy joke. Alright, you can either laugh at this or you can cringe, that's okay. But in any event, please follow our channel, support us. If this is useful to you, you can find some short lessons and some number theory tricks. And of course, remember, square roots don't have to be that scary if you know what you're doing. Thank you so much.